Emergency exits indicated at the back. Follow the signs. No fire exercises are planned for today, as far as we know. Restrooms out the door at the end. Turn right down to the basement. Follow the signs. Wi-Fi in the room and the network address and password on the signs. And for the online audience, please ask the questions via the chat. Noemi will collect all the questions and make sure that all the relevant ones are followed up during the Q&A sessions. And please use this option asking your questions. This is really a workshop where we can ask questions. No stupid questions, only important questions to get more informed. So we will know later on, this event will be recorded and the recording will be available online. And so this was just the practical information. So now we officially start the recording. Welcome to this two-day workshop implementing the co-funded European partnerships, a training for newcomers, jointly organized by the ERLEARN and the European Commission. I'm Tuzi from the Research Council of Norway, and I will be moderating today and tomorrow's sessions and try to guide you through this very interesting and very comprehensive program. And we start with a welcome address from both CNR, the hosting organization, and the European Commission. First, Fabrizio Tuzi, CNR, please take the floor.
Thank you. Welcome to the CNR. I am Fabrizio Tuzi, and I am the director of ISIRPA. ISIRPA is one of the research institute of CNR, and our research activities are focused on regional and federal system, multi-level governance, and regional innovation ecosystem. We are involved in the ERLEARN project in partnership with the MUL, with the Ministry of University, and it is very important, very useful for us to organize this kind of meeting for sharing knowledge and for fostering networking. I would like to thank Roland, Ursula, and all the ERLEARN partners for supporting us in the organization of this meeting. From our side, I would like to thank Noemi and Silvia for leading the organization of the meeting, and also Nicolette, Claudia, and Sarah for their technical support. I hope that this meeting will be useful for all of you, and I hope you enjoy your stay at CNR and your room. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Kathrin Kapfinger. She is a team leader at the European Commission for the European Partnerships. So please welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. So welcome to all of you who are able to join us here in person today, and also to those of you who are joining us online. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I don't just say that because of the nice weather in Rome. This workshop is jointly organized by ERLEARN and the European Commission, and it really reflects our joint commitment to support European partnerships and make sure that they work in practice. And at this moment, I would also like to thank again the ERLEARN team for making this possible, and Fabrizio for joining us. And yeah, I hope we're going to have a productive 2 days here. It's wonderful to see such a diverse group here today, to see a lot of new faces, but also some familiar faces who I know have years of experience in running co-funded partnerships. And I think this mix is going to make today's discussions particularly valuable for everyone. European partnerships are a central instrument for Horizon Europe, and they are set to remain so under the next framework program. As you all know, they are basically big joint efforts and investments of our time, resources, and efforts, and their success depends on all of us working together, and well, across national and European level. By strengthening our understanding of the instrument and by learning from each other, we make sure that partnerships deliver on their promise, which is to support excellent research and innovation and support EU policy goals. We are holding this workshop at a very timely moment. So 4 years into Horizon Europe, we have a lot of lessons learned when it comes to the implementation of co-funded partnerships. We've noticed that there's a lot of new colleagues involved in the running of already existing partnerships. So this can kind of be a refresher and an onboarding for those people who are new to those partnerships that are already existing. But on the other hand, we also have a number of new co-funded partnerships that will be launched in the 2025 work program. And we want to make sure that they start off on the right foot and that they can really benefit from the lessons learned so far. So the aim of these 2 days is really to clarify, to exchange on key aspects of co-funded European partnerships, and to demystify this instrument a little bit. We want to make sure that everybody leaves here with a clear understanding, or at least a clearer understanding of how co-funded partnerships work throughout their life cycle. So in the coming days, we will hear about their legal and financial frameworks, their governance structures, call organizations, monitoring and reporting, as well as phasing out. So the main purpose of this workshop is really to learn about co-funded partnerships as an instrument. So this is not necessarily going to be the place to go into detail when it comes to calculating specific costs or going into the specificities of individual partnerships, because we want to make sure that these discussions will benefit everyone, no matter what sector your partnership is active in. And those specific discussions are best had with your, with your specific commission or agency contacts. Instead, what we want to provide you with here is a clear picture of the fundamental of co-funded partnerships, so that you feel more comfortable in navigating your role and responsibilities in this instrument as you go out of this workshop. We want to build a shared sense of what works well, what doesn't, and how we can improve the implementation of co-funds in the future. As you heard already about the format, it is deliberately hybrid, so we will have plenary sessions that will be live streamed, so they are accessible for everyone, where ERA-Learn Commission colleagues from the executive agency that are here with me, and partnership practitioners will share their insights. And we will also have in-person interactive group sessions where we will dive deeper and really benefit from a peer learning setting. Please, I want you to really see this as a safe space to share very openly, to ask your questions very openly, even if you have questions that you might feel are very obvious or basic. Chances are, if you have that question, other people have that question too. So please feel free to really ask for clarifications and challenge our speakers a little bit over the coming days. We really ask you to share your questions, to share your own practices and experiences, so both the successes as well as the failures. I also encourage you to take or to use the networking moments, for those of you that are here, over coffee, over the networking cocktail tonight, to form these personal connections and expand your network when it comes to co-funded partnerships, because from our personal experience, the personal connections and the network, and again, this network of peers that you can build here is just as important as knowing about the formal content of co-funds and specific partnerships. So with that, I really look forward to 2 days of hopefully very fruitful discussions, and I thank you all again for being here, and I look forward to the rest of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathrin. We have this workshop. This is the first workshop on site after COVID, organized by ERA-Learn. And before that, there was normally one workshop every year. So this is also a new sort of invention, trying to have this hybrid format with both on-site and online participants. So we try to see how this works out. After the workshop, there will be a summary report telling more about, well, the summary of the content, what has been addressed, etc. It will probably not be very extensive in details, but cover both what has been discussed and also a summary from the Q&A sessions. in particular, remember the words from Kathrin. This is a safe space for discussing the topics. No stupid questions. If you are wondering about it, there is certainly another person that is also doing the same. There are a few changes or minor changes how we all set up the program compared to what you've heard about before, but you will see that as we go on. Kathrin told about all the details of what the topics that we are going to address. I will not repeat that, but I think we will go directly into the presentations. And first, we will have a presentation by Roland on the introduction to airline, who we are and what we do. Please, Roland. And if you can organize with the presenter yourself, that will be practical. You decide.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see so many of you. As already mentioned, this is the first workshop that we're hosting in person for co-funded partnerships. We have a long history of workshops for airline co-funds and before, but it's really a pleasure to have this hybrid format today and tomorrow. And the interest of the community tells us that this is urgently needed. We have 70 physical participants here and more than 200 online. I'm going to briefly introduce you to the Roland project, which is the host or co-host of this event. We've been around for a long time, since 2009, and our current phase runs from 23 to 27 to support the European partnerships under Horizon Europe. We're a consortium of 15 organizations, mainly funding organizations who participate themselves in such networks. So we have a long history and practical experience, which we bring into this project. And we have also specialists for analysis. And the main element of our support is the Roland portal, on which we provide all sorts of information that is geared towards target groups, policy level networks, funding organizations, but also researchers. And the content of the website is structured into several sections. You have information on partnerships in a nutshell, as we call it, including the portfolio. You have a big part of the portal dealing with a database on networks, funding organizations, country statistics, and joint calls and funding projects. And then we have the support section, in which we provide information on activities such as joint calls, but also additional activities, and also related to the management of networks, including governance and financial issues. And then there's a document repository where we publish our own documents, reports, but also provide access to documents that are published by the Commission, for example. And then there's information on events. The partnership portfolio currently shows the partnerships from the first strategic plan, but also indicates the partnerships from the second strategic plan. You can check out all the networks for yourself. We have them all in our database, including also some background information on the ones that have been invited, the co-funded partnerships topics in the Horizon Europe work programs. If you go to the database, you see the history of networks. You can find types of networks clustered by topics, and there's a timeline that you can check out. There's also information on country participation, including individual participations of individual organizations. And then there's a joint core calendar, which relies on input from the networks, obviously, which should facilitate an overview to researchers about upcoming calls. In the document section, we're publishing annual reports. We also have individual country reports. Currently, there's 10 reports, and the latest one was on Italy. So you're welcome to download. And as I said, there's also publications. For example, last year we published the 2 decades of European partnerships on the occasion of 20 years of P2Ps. There's also reports on mutual learning exercises and others, and also external events, as I already mentioned. There's also facts and figures on mainly Horizon 2020 network still, because as you may be aware, there's some gaps in Horizon Europe data. In the support section, just to show you the breakdown into topics, you have the governance and legal and financial issues, agreements, model consortium agreement, for example, would be accessible there. Then you have a big section on implementing joint calls, where we have a long history, of course, and then the cross-cutting additional activities, for which you find some practical examples, good practice, manuals and tools, and guiding docs. One of our main elements is, of course, the interaction with the community, such as the workshop today. We have been holding webinars and workshops on specific issues related to co-funded partnerships, but also related to monitoring of networks, on data transfer, the most recent event together with the Commission in June. And there's also our annual large event in December, typically the next one to be held on the 3rd of December in Brussels. There's a newsletter to which I would like to invite you to register to stay up to date. And there's more information available on the website for you to check out. And with that, I'm happy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to interesting things. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. You are really one of the guys that has been around with the ERA-Learn from the beginning, I guess.
Yes.
And one of the really experienced ones. Before I hand over to you, Kathrin, just to get to know you a little bit better, how many of you have considered yourself not a newcomer to these partnerships? Experienced one that really been involved? A few. Thank you. Because it's so important that we have a mix of participants. Both those that have good experience can share their knowledge to the newcomers, and also gain some insight, even if you are an experienced participant in the partnerships. Very good. And for those online, please indicate in the chat if you are a newcomer or consider yourself an expert, so we get an overview of who's attending this workshop. So with that, please, Kathrin, now you will give a general introduction of the co-funded partnerships. Please.
Thank you, and hello again. So before we dive into the specificities of co-funded partnerships, we thought it'd be good to zoom out for a moment and look at the partnerships instrument in general, and locate a little bit how the co-funds fit into this broader picture. So my first slide is on European partnerships. What are they and why are they? Partnerships are basically joint R&I programs that we undertake as the union with public and or private partners to tackle joint challenges. They have 3 main premises or features, let's say. They are supposed to give strategic orientation, or what we sometimes call directionality, to funding and resources, to create critical mass, so to avoid fragmentation and duplication of RNA efforts, and to achieve greater scale and impact than any partner could alone. They're also supposed to foster vibrant ecosystems, so it's not just about funding joint calls, but also integrative activities outside of funding, let's say, and to really bring together actors from across ecosystems and value chains to make sure that, again, we are all pulling on the same strings, so to say. Under Horizon Europe, we have a new approach to European partnerships. So as an instrument, partnerships have quite a bit of history. We've just celebrated 20 years, right? I'm looking at, yes, right. We just celebrated the 20-year anniversary of European partnerships. So the current Horizon Europe is not the starting point. We're looking at a very rich history, but the current framework program brought about quite a bit of revisions and changes to the instrument. So partnerships now have an even stronger strategic orientation than previously. All partnerships are required to have a strategic research and innovation agenda, which is a joint long-term roadmap that really lays out or sets a long-term vision for the partnership. We have simplified the architecture and the toolbox compared to Horizon 2020. So where we previously had over 120 partnerships, we're looking at about 60 today, and I will I will show you the portfolio again in just a moment. And we now are looking at 3 main implementation types. The Horizon Europe regulation also sets out criteria for the entire life cycle of partnerships. So this was another novelty. So the legal base specifies selection criteria, implementation criteria that are supposed to guide the partnership's implementation throughout their life cycle, as well as provisions for their phasing out from union funding. And so here we've made reference to the main articles on partnerships, Article 10 and Annex 3. And I really encourage all of you, if you're not familiar with the legal base of European partnerships, to take the time. It's not a lot. The article and the annex are quite short, but to really familiarize yourself with the legal context that partnerships operate in. So under Horizon Europe, we have 3 main implementation types, and here they're listed more or less in the order of complexity. So we have co-program partnerships, where we usually partner up with private partners that are based on memoranda of understanding. We have co-funded partnerships, where we partner up typically with public research and innovation funders that basically implement joint programs agreed and implemented by the partners. And the next 2 days are obviously going to be all about the co-funds, as well as institutionalized partnerships, which are a little bit specific, as in that they require their own legal base to be set up. And here we have kind of 3 different subtypes that we don't need to get into a lot more detail for the next couple of days. Horizon Europe also introduced a new governance framework for European partnerships, the so-called strategic coordinating process. So the objective of this process is really to have an evidence-based or support a more evidence-based approach to partnerships and to gain a strategic vision of the landscape and the performance of partnerships. So key elements of this governance framework are the Partnership Knowledge Hub. This is a forum where we exchange, a dedicated forum where we exchange with member states on all strategic aspects related to partnerships. So the Partnership Knowledge Hub is the members are representatives from member states, but there are also observers for every partnership. So usually once a year, there's a meeting where the observers are also invited from the partnerships to provide their input and share their experiences, depending on what topics are being discussed. The Partnership Knowledge Hub has published a few opinions over the years that you can all find online. All of the sources will be linked later in the presentation. Then important to mention is also the biannual monitoring report. So this is really a dedicated monitoring framework that we established under Horizon Europe, tailor-made for European partnerships, as there are certain, let's say, performance or impact indicators that are not captured through other monitoring exercises that are important to really measure the impact of our partnerships on the ground. And here we have a dedicated session tomorrow where you will learn all about how how these biannual monitoring reports are being produced, and what kind of input that requires from the partnerships. Then, as Roland already mentioned, we also have a very important aspect of this is also the stakeholder forum. So this is really an annual event where the whole partnerships community can come together and discuss strategic implementation issues, all things partnerships. The next one will take place on December 3rd in Brussels, and I invite you all to come and join us there. So moving on, I wanted to recall or to present a little bit the partnerships portfolio more broadly in Horizon Europe. And here you have the budgetary commitments to European partnerships. As I mentioned, the entire portfolio under Horizon Europe will count 60 partnerships in total. So these figures only cover 58 because 2 of them are still under negotiations when it comes to their budget. So those are not included here. But I just wanted to illustrate what kind of the weight that partnerships carry in the framework program, and to really show you that a lot of the framework program is implemented through European partnerships, which makes them such an important instrument. So we're looking at over 25 billion euros in estimated commitments from Horizon Europe. So this is the Union contribution to all partnerships that we intend to invest until the end of the framework program, which represents just about 42% of Horizon Europe's Pillar 2 on collaborative research, and in total over 25% of the framework program. So just again to illustrate that we're talking about a big commitment from our side, but of course also from the side of the partners, as with these 25 billion Union contribution, we are leveraging or expected to leverage over 38 billion euros from public and private partners. So this is really, partnerships are really a way for us to make sure that our investments have a lot of impact. Now, Roland already showed you this one, but it is part of my presentation as well, and the layout is a little bit differently. And I apologize for all the people in the back. This is, however, one of my favorite slides. Here you see the whole portfolio of European partnerships under Horizon Europe. As I said, we will have 60 in total. Here you see them divided by cluster, color-coded by implementation type. And the ones that are boxed in red are all of the new ones we say, so the ones that are launched through the 2025 work program or even beyond. So you see you have quite a mixed picture across the clusters. You have some clusters that feature more co-funded partnerships, more public-public collaborations, some that are almost exclusively made up of public-private partnerships, so it all depends. You see a little bit on the sector where the partnerships are active in. Hope you can see, but all of the materials will be made available later on as well. But yeah, so we're looking at a quite big, a quite complex landscape, and yeah, getting a little bit more into co-funded partnerships. As I already mentioned, usually in co-funded partnerships, our partners are public, so national funding bodies or agencies or ministries, depending on the partnership. Their legal form, and I don't want to get into too many details because we'll have a dedicated session on a lot of these, or dedicated sessions on a lot of these things later on as well. But their legal form is basically, they're implemented through a grant agreement based on a program for co-fund action that is signed between the Commission on the one hand and a consortium of partners that implement the partnerships on the other. In terms of the implementation, just to highlight a few key features of partnerships. So it is the partners that really design a common program to be implemented under the responsibility of the partners that pools national funding and resources with co-funding from the Union. Typically, the main activity of co-funds are joint transnational calls. Sometimes we refer to that as financial support to third parties or cascade funding. So this is usually the principal activity, complemented, however, by additional activities or integrative activities, as I was saying, because we want partnerships to be about more than just pooling funding. Calls and evaluations are usually organized centrally. Beneficiaries in selected projects are funded at national level on the basis of national rules. So this is where co-funds are, let's say, a little bit more complex than other implementation types of partnerships, where EU funding rules apply a little bit more consistently. Typically, co-funded partnerships have a funding rate, so a union funding rate or top-up rate of 30%, in justified cases up to 50%, but this depends on the specific partnership. And the EU top-up is based on Horizon Europe eligible costs. So this is another specificity of the co-funds, including financial support to third parties. To give you, well, a bit of an overview of how all of this works in practice. Here, I've kind of divided co-funds into two kind of phases, preparation and implementation, because the preparation is also a phase that is a little bit different from, let's say, your typical project. So what happens in the preparatory phase is that participating states and the Commission set the priority for the partnerships together. So this happens typically a couple of years in advance of the partnerships launching, and this is under Horizon Europe. This has been firmly embedded in the strategic planning cycle. So we had two strategic plans, so two documents where we identified what co-funded partnerships we would launch, and this was strongly co-created together with the member states. Together, we also decide on the budget of these partnerships. For co-funds, this is a bit of a specific process where we usually send out requests from our Commissioner for Research and Innovation to the national R&I ministries, where we ask who is interested in a partnership, how much they're willing to commit, so that we can make sure that we end up on a budget that is realistic or feasible for both parties. Then the program co-fund action that will implement the partnership is published in the in Horizon Europe work program. And then you kind of follow the more normal stages of a proposal is prepared, submitted, evaluated, and finally a grant agreement is signed between, again, the Commission and the partners. Then in terms of implementation, this is really very simplified, and we're going to get into this a lot more in the coming days. The idea is that it is the consortium that implements the activities and funds beneficiaries at national level. The consortium then reports the costs incurred to the Commission. The Commission assesses the reported costs and reimburses what is eligible. And this cycle kind of repeats throughout the implementation of the partnerships. Now, I'm sure you're all curious as well in the current context to know a little bit about what the future holds. A very hot topic. We had a legal package that was adopted in July 25 on the next framework program, Horizon Europe. We're probably going to try and keep the name for consistent branding. So the next Horizon Europe, or FP10. So we had a proposal for the regulation itself, as well as a proposal for the specific program implementing this regulation. And there are a couple of key articles or provision on the future of European partnerships. There's a limited amount of things we can say, and I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, to tell you where the negotiations are going to end up. We have now just started the interinstitutional negotiation process, so it's up to the Council and the Parliament to also make their views heard and shape the proposal with us together. So what is on the table today is really just a Commission proposal, and to be determined how exactly this is going to shape up over the coming months and years. But just to highlight a few key elements of the proposal when it comes to partnerships, the proposal highlights that we would like to have a very strong portfolio dimension in the selection of future partnerships. As you just saw on the slide, 60 partnerships, even if they represent a big rationalization effort compared to Horizon 2020 is still a lot. So this is one thing that everybody can always agree on, that we still have too many partnerships, a very complex landscape, and that in some cases we have kind of a bit of a risk of overlaps, and it's a difficult landscape to navigate for all parties involved, basically. We are also trying to further streamline, so we try to streamline and consolidate the current landscape even more. The proposal makes reference to a strategic portfolio of a limited number of partnerships. So the idea is, again, to really like tighten up the portfolio, make sure it reflects our strategic priorities. There's also further efforts to simplify the toolbox to enable what we call tripartite collaborations more easily. So basically to have partnerships cover not just public-public collaborations or public-private collaborations, but with union public-private collaborations to make this a lot more simple than it is under the current context. Then another big emphasis is put on the principle of reciprocity and trying to ensure tangible contributions from our partners, as well as on harmonized rules and procedures to make sure that we can implement partnerships in a consistent and coherent way in the future as well. Further resources, there are lots of resources that you can access if you have questions about partnerships in general or co-funds. So we have a website dedicated to partnerships on europa.eu, where you can find all information about the current portfolio, about events, publications, news items, reports, anything we publish, you will find there. Of course, ERA-Learn, Roland just illustrated the great depth of materials and knowledge that they have there. So I really encourage you to familiarize yourself with ERA-Learn and sign up for the newsletter. There's lots of events and workshops that happen on a quite frequent basis that are very helpful. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us directly. We have a functional mailbox where we try to help you as needed. Yeah, so that's just a bit of an introduction. If you have any immediate questions, please feel free. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention.
So now we are diving into the legal requirements for the co-funded partnerships in Horizon Europe, the grant agreement and general requirements. And we are so happy to have two from the European Commission participating online, Bartosz Majewski and Miguel Escandon, Martin from DDRTD, that will do this presentation. And I guess I will have, or can you do? Yeah. So please, Bartosz and Miguel, and just indicate when the slides are to be shifted.
Yes,
Please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the room?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. My name is Bartosz Majewski. I work as a legal officer in DGRTD and in Common Legal Support Service. Today, together with my colleague Miguel Escandon Martin, we are going to delve into the world of co-funded partnerships under Horizon Europe. Let's get started and explore how these partnerships work, their legal framework, and eligibility criteria. Next slide, please. So in the beginning, I would like to mention that as far as I'm concerned, the slides will be shared with you. And after this presentation, we will have the time to reply to a couple of your questions if something won't be clear for you. We will start with the legal basis. After the legal basis, we will focus on the specificities of co-funded partnerships, including the eligibility of the costs, the roles that can occur during implementation of the action, and what are the core obligations related to providing financial support to third parties. Next slide, please. As you may know, the co-funded partnerships in Horizon Europe are the evolution of ERANET co-funds that some of you may remember from Horizon 2020. In Horizon Europe, the co-funded partnerships are one of the specific types of action, which also has specific rules that you have to follow when you are implementing them. However, the majority of the rules are the same as for any other type of action known from the rest of Horizon Europe program. Next slide, please. So the Article 2 of Horizon Europe regulation provides a definition of a program co-fund action. So the co-fund action provides multi-annual co-funding to a program of activities established or implemented by legal entities managing or funding research and innovation programs. These activities can support a wide range of initiatives, from networking and coordination to research and innovation and market deployment actions. Imagine a scenario where multiple entities can come together to pool their resources, expertise, and funding to tackle some of the most pressing challenges of our time. That's exactly what the co-funded partnerships aim to achieve. They are implemented through two main streams: the joint calls and additional activities. Joint calls provide financial support to third parties, while additional activities can include anything from training and mobility to awareness raising and communication. So it really depends on case by case what kind of additional activities are foreseen for the partnerships. Co-funded partnerships are designed to support transnational projects that have a clear European dimension. This means that the projects must involve participants from at least 2 different member states or associated countries. And the goal is to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing across the borders, leading to innovative solutions that can benefit the entire Europe. Next slide, please. As I said before, the core function of the co-funded partnership is to organize the joint calls. In order to do it, beneficiaries of the grant agreement must use so-called financial support to third parties. What is the financial support to third parties? It is one of the cost categories that may be used by the beneficiaries, if mentioned in the call conditions, to provide financial resources to the third parties. The legal setup is that European Commission is signing a grant agreement with the consortium, and this consortium is providing the funding to final recipients in line with the proposal, which is incorporated into the grant agreement as an annex. This is how your proposal becomes a legal document. Next slide, please. The final recipients of co-funded partnerships are the third parties to the grant agreement, which means that they are not signing it. We often call FSTP as a cascade funding because it is not the Commission who is providing the financial support to the final recipients, but it is the beneficiaries that are responsible for this. We have 2 levels of the rules. One is between the European Commission and the beneficiaries. In case of co-funded partnerships, the beneficiaries meaning national funding bodies. And the second level is between the beneficiaries and final recipients. At the first level, the key document is grant agreement between the Commission and beneficiaries, and on the second level, the grant agreement between the beneficiaries and the recipients of the financial support. There are 2 ways how the financial support may be given to the third parties: grants and prizes. I'm sure that you know the difference. The grants are financial donations based on the call, and prizes are given on the basis of a contest organized by the beneficiary. FSTP is a cost category that may be used under any type of grant, meaning research and innovation action, or under CSA, whenever the call description explicitly allows for this kind of support. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the legal framework that governs co-funded partnerships. The Horizon Europe regulation defines a program co-fund action as an action to provide multi-annual co-funding. The financial regulation, along with general annexes and model grant agreement, sets out the specific rules and conditions for these partnerships. Next slide. I will explain further the legal basis. So, the financial regulation in Article 204 specifies that the grant agreement must clearly define the maximum amount that can be paid to third party. the types of activities that may receive such financial support, and the criteria for determining the exact amount of the FSTP. This ensures the transparency and accountability in the allocation of the funds. The general annexes and the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement also provide detailed guidelines on the implementation of co-funded partnerships. In particular, General Annex B specifies that FSTP may be used only when the call conditions explicitly allow for it. Moreover, the applicants must clearly describe the objective and the expected results in the dedicated part of the proposal. And in line with the general annexes, the calls should be published widely and adhere to EU standards of transparency, equal treatment, and conflict of interest and confidentiality. In Model Grant Agreement, Article 6.2 D1 and Article 9.4 outline the conditions for providing FSTP to third parties and the obligations of the beneficiaries. Next slide. You have to be aware that co-funded partnerships are governed by the standard rules applicable also to other types of action. I know that in Horizon 2020 it was different. The rules of ERA-NETS were very specific. Now, the only difference between the standard Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement and co-funded partnership Model Grant Agreement is that there is an Annex 5 which specifies the rules applicable to co-funded partnerships. The provisions of Annex 5 focus only on the cascading scenario, so the specific rules that have to be followed by national funding agencies when organizing and providing FSTP. As I said before, co-funded partnerships are implemented through two main streams: joint calls and additional activities. Joint calls, as I said, this is just to provide the financial support to third parties, while additional activities can include anything in line, of course, with your proposal and the call conditions. This means that for additional activities foreseen in your proposal, it is only the standard rules of MGI that applies. Next slide, please. It's the beneficiaries of the grant agreement who define the rules of financial support to third parties in line with MGA and their proposal. However, there are some rules from grant agreement that must be respected at the level of FSTP. In principle, the final recipients will follow the rules of grant agreements that they sign with funding bodies, with you. However, the national funding bodies are responsible to ensure that some of the obligations are respected by the final recipients. This means that the grant agreements signed at the national level must have the provisions about avoiding conflict of interest, confidentiality, ethics, information obligations, record keeping. What is also very important that you need to ensure that there is a clause that the bodies mentioned in Article 25, meaning the granting authority, ECA or OLAF, have the right to carry out checks, reviews, or audits, in particular to audit the payments received. Next slide. As I said before, from the MGA perspective, the only difference between co-funded partnerships and typical Horizon Europe action is that in Annex 5 there are some specific mandatory conditions for while implementing FSTP. In the next slide, we will focus on those specific conditions applicable to financial support to third parties under the co-funded partnerships. One very important information is that when you organize FSTP, which does not follow those rules that we will be talking right now, this may lead to the cost rejection. So you will not be able to claim the cost of the FSTP that you have provided. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's begin with the fact that the calls have to be transnational, and the cascaded projects must be implemented by at least two independent legal entities from two different member states or associated countries, or one legal entity from member state or associated country and one legal entity from non-associated third country. The consortium must publish the joint calls on the funding and tenders portal, and these calls have to be kept open for at least 2 months. One more very important fact is that the selection must follow a two-step procedure. It is necessary to ensure that the entities that are eligible for funding under the national funding rules are invited to step 2, and that the consortia can balance the requested funding and available funding per member state and associated country between steps 1 and 2. This is why it is necessary to have those two-step procedure, because the step 1 usually is at the national level and step 2 is the final international peer review. In step 2, the proposal must be evaluated with the assistance of at least 3 independent experts per proposal, and the evaluation must use the same award criteria as Horizon Europe calls. Next slide, please. Okay. So these criteria are excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency of the implementation. The selection procedure must be followed by the observer who is independent. There is a ranking list, and the consortium must foresee to provide the information about the co-funded call and projects in the correct template, so we can incorporate these data into our IT system. And of course, the proposal must specify the maximum amount of financial support to a third party, and criteria for determining the amount of the support. Next slide, please. Okay, I talked a lot about FSTP, but let's come back to the basic rules of implementation of the action. On this slide, you can see the roles that may be used while implementing the project. First of all, we have the beneficiaries who sign the agreement and have all the rights and obligations. Secondly, we have affiliated entities, which are the entities that have a legal or capital link with the beneficiary and can implement the action and also declare the costs while they are not signing the grant agreement. It is the beneficiary which has the link with affiliated entity who is responsible towards the Commission for the work and costs of affiliated entity. The role and budget of affiliated entities has to be identified in the proposal. In Horizon Europe, we have also identified the role of associated partners, who can work on the action but cannot declare the costs. Usually these are the entities from third countries. They do not sign the grant agreement, and because of that, not all of the provisions, because they cannot declare the costs of the grant agreement, are applicable to them. But their role also has to be identified in the proposal. The next role is subcontractors. I'm sure that you know that these are the entities who implement one of the action tasks, which were chosen based on the best value for money principle by the beneficiary. The name of the subcontractor in principle should not be mentioned in the proposal, as usually beneficiaries are choosing them during the duration of the action. The next on the list are the third parties that are providing the in-kind contribution. These are the entities that are making available some of their resources to a beneficiary for free. The beneficiaries may declare the costs incurred by those third parties. Here, I would like to stress that I know that some of you are still using the term in-kind contribution to define the part of action which is not the financial support to third parties. This may be misleading because in Horizon Europe it's no longer the in-kind contribution. These are simply the costs of the action. So whenever you want to declare the costs related to organizing the calls using your own resources, these are the costs, not the in-kind contribution. In line with model grant agreement, in-kind contribution means that it's coming from third party of the grant agreement. Moreover, it's given by for free. The beneficiaries are declaring all costs related to the action. The last on the list are the recipients of financial support to third parties, which are the entities who receive the financial contribution from the beneficiaries in line with the proposal. They also don't sign the grant agreement with the Commission. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to give you some advice regarding the preparation of your proposal. So at the proposal stage, it is important to remember that whenever you want to use FSTP, you have to describe the FSTP using the specific annex to your proposal, which, as you can see on the slide, it's you can download it from Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. This document will be the key information about the rules of FSTP that you want to be followed by the recipients of FSTP and also by you. Next slide. Okay, during the gap stage, so the time before the signature of the grant agreement, the granting authority may wish to discuss some parts of your proposal. The applicants and the granting authority must agree on the content of your proposal in case that there are some errors or unclear parts. As you know, in principle, there is no negotiation rule, but in case of co-funded partnerships, we may be more flexible as beneficiaries are member state funding bodies and we have the same goal to make the partnership successful. Next slide. Okay, we receive a lot of questions about who can be the recipient of FSTP, about the eligibility of recipients of FSTP. We always reply that this depends on the proposal. It is the beneficiaries who are setting the eligibility rules for the recipients of financial support to third parties. The only rule is that this has to be in line with your proposal. So it is the beneficiaries in their proposal who decide on the eligibility conditions of the entities from third countries. So it's up to you to set up the rules. Next slide, please. You have to keep in mind that there are some restrictions that are going also at the level of financial support to third parties. For example, legal entities established in Russia or Belarus cannot be recipients of financial support to third parties. The same with some Hungarian entities who are established under the Hungarian Act 9 of 2021. On this slide, you can see all participation eligibility restrictions that are applicable directly at the level of FSTP. As I said before, all other rules have to be defined by you in the proposal. Next slide. From MGA perspective, as I said before, FSTP is just one of the cost categories. It's very simple because the amounts that you declare are the amounts paid to the recipients in line with the grant agreement signed by you and the recipients of financial support. Therefore, it is important that the costs are borne by the beneficiaries of the action. So if the money are sent by the third party to the grant agreement, meaning not by the beneficiary or affiliated entity, these costs cannot be declared by the beneficiary as a cost. So make sure that if you are a funding agency, for example, it is you who are sending the money, not any other actor, because if that entity is not the beneficiary or affiliated entity, these costs cannot be declared. Next slide. On this slide, you have all general cost eligibility conditions, which are applicable to all cost categories, including financial support to third parties. So the cost must be actually incurred by the beneficiary. So, as I said before, this means that it is the beneficiary who have those costs recorded in its accounts. The costs must be incurred during the action duration in one of the budget categories. As it's not possible to plan the budget and all the possible small expenses, therefore the Commission is quite flexible. The rule is that the costs may be eligible if they are borne in connection with the action and necessary for its implementation. And I'm sure it's clear for you that the cost must be identifiable and verifiable. I'm sure that funding agencies know what we meant by that. Very important thing is that you don't have to change your usual accounting practices, as we accept the costs which are borne in accordance with your usual accounting practices. Of course, the cost must comply with applicable national law, be reasonable, justified, and comply with sound financial management. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the cost categories that may be used in all type of actions, including co-funded partnerships. As I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, co-funded partnerships are focusing on providing FSTP. All costs related to management of the calls, evaluation, organization of meetings within the consortium have to be declared under one of the budget categories shown on this slide. So the FSTP cost category is reserved only for the financial support sent to third parties. The costs of personnel involved in the management of the calls, has to be declared in one of the personnel cost categories. We have the personnel costs, cost of subcontracting, the cost of purchases, including travel and equipment costs, other cost categories, including FSTP and costs of internally invoiced goods and services. And on the top, we have 25% flat rate for indirect cost. And those costs are calculated automatically based on all eligible cost categories minus subcontracting and FSTP. Next slide. The last topic that I would like to shortly explain is the conflict of interest. In normal project, the beneficiaries, meaning the members of the consortium, cannot be also the final recipients of FSTP. However, taking into account the specificities of co-funded partnerships and the nature of the funding agencies in some countries, for co-funded partnerships, we made an exception, which is described in details in Annex 5 of Annotated Model Grant Agreement. The principles are that the beneficiary research performing organization shall not take part in work streams connected to preparation of financial support to third parties. Everything has to be organized in such a manner to avoid any potential conflict of conflict of interest. Next slide, please. So in practical terms, the consortium is asked to, first of all, present a clear list of beneficiaries that will have the responsibility of drafting the call text and managing the award procedure. On the other hand, they have to identify the beneficiaries which can apply for funding under the co-funded call for proposals. They should explain the measures to mitigate the potential conflict of interest and reflect this fully in description of action, so in the proposal, both in the context of description of the co-funded call and in relation to the monitoring of the transnational projects. To do so, I think it's necessary to set up the firewalls to prevent exchanges of communication that could lead to conflict of interest or unequal treatment of applicants and ensure independent and fair compliance procedures. The message that I want to pass is that whenever you have doubts regarding the conflict of interest, please contact your project officer, who should be able to help to find you the best solution to avoid the conflict of interest and, if necessary, maybe to amend the grant agreement not to put you on the risk for the conflict of interest to happen. Okay, next slide. In addition to the legal framework and guidelines we have discussed, there are several resources available to help you to navigate in the world of the co-funded partnerships. ERA-Learn is a platform that provides information and support for implementation of co-funded partnerships. There are national contact points who are also available to provide advice and assistance to potential applicants. The document that I find very useful is the guidance documents on financial support to third parties, which was published this summer, and if you haven't read it, please do so. The annotated model grant agreement is the most important document when it comes to eligibility of the costs and other rules related to implementation of the action. I'm sure that you will find 95% of answers to your questions there. It's a very big document, but at the same time, at least this is my impression, it's user-friendly. And make sure that before asking the question to project officer or directly to us, please read the part of annotated migrant agreement related to your question. If you want to ask the question directly to the Commission, you can use the Research and Query service. There are also a lot of other documents that may be useful, such as program guide, online manual, and other documents published in Funding and Tenders portal. Next slide, please. Okay, that's it. I hope I wasn't very boring, and I wanted to thank you for your attention. In case if you have questions, me and my colleague Miguel will try to answer them.
So, morning everyone. I hope you're still capable of a few more inputs after all these presentations and all these legal complex details that you're in. I want to give you a bit of an experience from one of the partnerships of the first wave. We are operating since 4 years, and I personally managed this kind of network since 2010. So I was in all the phases from a JPI into a self-standing network covering ARANETs, and now into one of the partnerships. And that's a long way, and it's getting more complicated at every step you're going to take. That's the good news for a start, right? Yes. We saw some overviews from the Commission, how this consortium are going to look like in all the details on the legal basis, and it's far more complicated than it was presented so far. Summing it up, there are quite some fundamental differences between an ARANET that you might have experiences with a partnership, and that's due to a couple of reasons, right? So in the ARANETs, you had a single call and a bit of additional activities, and you had these unit costs, which made it awfully easy because the main focus was still the financial support to third parties, and then there was a bit of a rest that was covered with the unit cost, and it was super easy to administrate that. That's over, right? That's definitely over. We are now, the good thing is that this is a long-term partnership. You don't have to run from one ARANET to the other and build upon that. We had, as JPF in Europe, 3 ARANETs running in parallel, so that's a mess as well, right? So now this is a long-term program. It's strategic oriented. You have 5 or 7 calls that you're managing. You can really build a strategic consortium and a program to manage. And the intention is super good. It comes with some costs on the administration. Right? Having the point of actual costs that you need to get granted and approved by the Commission will add, or is going to add, substantial administrative efforts on your side. At the same time, the partnership have been started with the intention to not just run joint calls, but to really implement a comprehensive program management. And I don't know how far you are in your various partnerships when you're starting that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that you can build on something that is kind of more than just financing projects, but that you can really work with them, that you can add value and create wider impact. So this strategic program portfolio, program management that you can establish is absolutely an added value. Again, however, you are stuck with administration to get the money reimbursed, to set up all the details that you can implement that. Just to give you an example, this is our vision that we have laid out in, I hope you can somehow read that back in the room, that was developed with all the partners, and you do not read the words funding and research project network, right? This is about the wider impact that we want to create. And it might be different in your networks, but we are heavily building upon this approach of having the calls as a backbone, but they are a mean to an end, right? So the intention is to really deliver an impact, to work with the communities, to work with the projects, to have a strategic approach to the content that we are working with in the urban scene, in our case, so that we can add to the strategic intentions and objectives of the Commission, of our member states, and deliver kind of more than just publications, than just a number of projects, but that there is much more that we can contribute. And this has some conditions in order to comply to that. So our consortium, they are big. I don't know how big your consortium are, but they are quite big. You have a lot of different partners, many countries, and you want to add along the way more partners and more countries in order to have this added value that you can then demonstrate. But the point is, the consortium consists not only of the funders, of course, they are essential, and we have, I don't know, more than 40 funding agencies in our consortium, but we also have the policymakers. We have a bunch of ministries, and they are really important. We would like to have more of them, but not all partners in the countries are ready to mobilize. Not every ministry is able to engage, right? Or regions. So just having also our Portuguese partners here, we have a few regions engaging here as well. So this is from the policy side important. If you want to deliver impact, these are essential partners that connect to the national policy. And finally, it was mentioned already a bit, the role of research performing organizations or other strategic partners that are usually part of these consortia of the financial funded projects consortia, but they are important if you want to deliver on some strategic activities. You need capacities to deliver, right? It's not only that the funding agencies can implement all of that on their own. They have the mandate, usually, that's my experience, that they are implementing joint calls and funding projects, but they don't have the mission, they don't have the resources to do strategic analysis, to do dissemination, to do valorization, to community building, capacity building, and you name it, right? That's not their task. So you need someone who can do that. And that means that you need to get these different bodies and organizations in your consortium in the best case. There are other ways to deal with that. I will come back to that in a bit. But that, of course, having these complex consortia with different kind of partners has consequences for your governance structure. So the principles that we try to acknowledge in our consortium governance structure is that we have different constellations, different configurations in the governing board, depending on who you need to decide for a given decision. So that there are different roles, there are different kind of mandates, and different rights to decide in the consortium. We have defined specific additional bodies and structures that help us to accommodate all the different needs that we have for the calls, for the additional activities, different kinds of. It's getting complex in itself, but we try to be focused in what setup do we need to address a particular needs, a particular condition. And there are formats and interfaces that we included in the governance structure right away to deal with neighboring initiatives, to deal with different kinds of communities, so that there are entry points that allow us to, as efficiently as we possibly can, to work with them. So running a bit through our governance structure. Governing board and management board, starting with the simple things, right? You can imagine that you have your governing board, the decision-making body, and you have the management team that is really doing the operations. And of course, the interface to the European Commission on different ends and the agencies, of course. So then if we zoom in a bit on the governing board, we do have obviously the configuration for the beneficiaries, because that's the bottom line of the grant agreement when it comes to the interface and the cooperation with the European Commission, right? That's quite natural. We are treated as a regular Horizon Europe project, although we are not, but still we are treated as that at the end of the day. As soon as you sign the grant agreement, you are managed as a European project with everything that it takes. So that means that you have your beneficiaries have a particular role, obligations towards the Commission, and that's covered in the configuration of the beneficiaries of the grant agreement. That's on all the budgets, on all further applications, the reporting, all goes along with that. We have established another one that's on the national level. We, as the partnership, start as a member states partnership with the Commission. It's not only about the single beneficiaries, but we see that there is a role on the national level. That if we have some 4 partners in a country sometimes, that they should coordinate themselves, right? That they have a national position, for example, when it comes to very strategic outreach. We are now preparing towards whatever comes. In the next phase, there are some strategic developments that we need to cover, and they might require some national discussions and some national positions. And we also noticed quite early that there is a link between all the partners of one country and the national system that there is. And this, we encourage our partners, particularly the ministries and the agencies, of course, to work and establish a national coordination, because the impact is only as strong as you bring your results to the countries and down into your national ecosystems, right, or regional ones or local ones. So this is not just the work that we are doing as a partnership on a transnational level, because we can only do so much. We are so many people and so many working hours and so many analyses that we can do. But if we're not translating that back into the countries, into the national ecosystems, into national policies, in the best case, then the overall impact will be limited. So this link to the national level is important, and you should consider that somehow. The next one is the level of the calls, the very big backbone that we're running. And there are well-established procedures. I'm sure you can learn a lot from all the learn documents from the experiences of agencies running these transnational calls. I think this is quite, I don't know if I call it standardized, but there is a lot of experience how we run that. And we have set up this group of program managers and owners, which means basically the funding agencies and the ministries that own and are responsible for this funding and these programs that are in charge of implementing the calls and setting the framework for this. So they are deciding at the end of the day on the call text, and they're taking decisions then on the funded calls, and they are really there to implement that. And Teresa will talk right after me on all the details related to the calls. So that's a specific configuration as well. And last but not least, as we are convinced that we have a very strategic approach, we have set up steering groups, steering committees for our 3 thematic priorities that we have. So we have established in our agenda and in the proposal 3 thematic priorities that the partnership is dealing with. And they are long-term. They guide our direction of what kind of topics we are addressing in the calls, what kind of additional activities we're doing. There is, for each of these 3 thematic priorities, there is a mission, an ambition, a goal that we have defined, and we're working towards that over these more than 10 years that we're operating, right? So every call has a reference on that. And in order to steer that and not make it kind of random what topics we are launching, we have set up these steering groups for each of the 3 thematic priorities, and they are composed mainly of policymakers, of the ministries that are in charge of these thematics. They shall help us to define the priorities so that we can build upon the national systems, that we add value to their work, that we do that on a transnational level. So they are 3 groups of people, of policymakers, agencies that have a thematic interest in the priorities that we are addressing. And they have these interlinks. And basically, we are mirroring that in the management team. We have a coordinator for each of these 3 transition pathways in the management team. We have the call management team that is running the whole transnational operations of the call implementation, and we have several other people. I will just go into that. So that's basically how we are running the whole structure. And the governing board meetings twice a year, they are structured also in their decision making. What kind of configurations do we need, right? Is that if there is a new partner that wants to come on board to the consortium, then there's a decision for the configuration 1. Is there something on a call specific question, then it might be the configuration 3. So we are really dedicating what kind of decision do we need to take and who is the body that needs to take it. Then quickly, a few more things that we have established. We do have we're putting quite some effort into capacity building and community building activities in order to mobilize the communities in our countries, that to approach in our case, the cities. It might be other stakeholders in your cases, regional actors that we want to make aware, mobilize, build upon based on their experiences, so that it's not an academic exercise. We are very much consulting people along the entire way, right? So we have set up different formats that we are using in order to engage with these communities. We have our Agora. This is kind of the big open forum where everyone that is interested can engage, a city, a business, an NGO, whoever has a stake in a particular thematics. We have a city panel that is a more long-term, stable framework that allows to consult with cities as the core stakeholders in our topic, right? When we're touching about urban issues, we need to understand what the needs of the cities are in order to be relevant, in order to hit the important topics that matter to these communities. So we're talking to them regularly. And there is another interface then to neighboring initiatives, to other networks, other partnerships that we try to the city's mission. In our case, for example, we try to align with what is going on in the European context. So that is it in a nutshell. When we zoom into the management team, we're about 20 people working, several of them full-time. This is really a capacity that you need. You can't do that part-time. We need people that are working full-time on that in the management. So we have the coordination team that's in my organization, a team where the legal, the financial, the whole coordination of bringing everything together is working. We have 3 people and plus a bit more, so that's about 5 full-time equivalents working on the thematic coordination of our 3 thematic priorities that are preparing for the process for the core topic development, community building, strategic analysis, to bring things together, to work with the project, do analysis, dissemination, and you name it. The core management team, another, I would say, and Teresa might be more concrete on that, about 5 people engaged in managing the transnational call implementation. And then all the work package and task leads that have a particular role in designing and implementation, a format and activity on the community building, valorization, dissemination. A communication team of about 3 full-time equivalents that are running all the communication efforts that we need. So this is a capacity, and if you want to do more than just launching calls, you will need to think about these capacities. And the point is that we need that in order to run our strategic activities, and a few of these are highlighted, but it is about a strategic long-term planning. You need to revisit your strategies, you need to prepare every year the call topics, you need to do some consultations, you need to involve the community, empower different new stakeholder groups. We put quite some efforts into new formats to bring, for example, NGOs into the R&I game. It's usually very difficult for them. They don't have the time, the knowledge, and all of that. So we try to encourage them, we try to train them, bring them on board, so that we get those actors that are very relevant to creating an impact on board as well. Synthesis, dissemination, valorization, so all of that are topics that are covered in our proposal, in tasks, work packages, and they are implemented as we go. And that in order to do that, many of these activities that come to the program management, the strategic work, as said, you can't do that as a funding agency alone, right? Or as a ministry, neither. So you need someone that has the capacity that you can pay for it or bring on board in different ways. So the roles that we see for R&I organizations or consultants or other parts, it does not necessarily be a university or a research organization, but someone else beyond a funding agency and a ministry, they provide resources. It's easier for them to, they have staff to do that. And that's important for some thematic analysis, some strategic analysis in your priorities. They can help with developing formats and concepts for dissemination, valorization. We established a knowledge hub. We are developing innovation portfolios. All that needs people that help us get the glimpse of it, right? Investigate what their projects are doing, cooperating with the projects, doing different synthesis on these, translating that into communication papers, into policy briefs, into something else that have an impact or that can help disseminate what you're doing. So there is quite a role of these other kinds of organizations, and it is difficult, as we have heard several times, right? This big thing of conflict of interest is all over the place. So from my point there, we are using 3 different ways of involving them. We have a few of them as consortium partners, and we heard that this is then tricky. You need to deal with the conflict of interest, and I'll come to that in a sec. You can contract them. So we did a subcontracting for expert advice that helped us for 4 years period. So this is quite a big contract that we did that provides experts, gives us experts at hand that work with us rather on a daily basis for a couple of years, that help us to overcome this hurdle of conflict of interest and get us the expertise and capacity basically that we need. And what we also did, we're using our funded projects. We tested that already before we started DUT, and this means that there is a mandatory part in the call text that says every project needs to plan for a given amount of resources to work with us. And they are not free on doing what they want. This is then agreed with us, what they are doing in terms of connecting projects, analysis, we're coming together. So this is an expert support facility, we call that. So we have from a call, every project has an expert. They're nominating 2 or so, and we're picking then one, saying, this is the expert. You have the resources of, I don't know, a month for your project or for the given period. And that's what you're spending with us to make the most out of your project. So there are different formats that you can use in a creative way to make sure that you get what you need and that you have more resources on all the strategic work. When it comes to having them as a consortium partner, what we did is we checked, so we set up a non-disclosure agreement, a particular documents laying out what the expert from such a partner is allowed to do or what they're not allowed to do. They are signing that, and this document is agreed with the project officer, as was asked for already before. And when everything is all right from the side of the agency, this is signed by the person and the organization from the research organization, allowing then setting the framework, what they are allowed to do in terms of firewalls, of not sharing data beyond very, very few experts that are there. And what we try to be very clear on, that these are people that can help us also in the whole consultation process, but that we try to close the doors when we are developing the call text explicitly, right? So you can involve many people in your consultation. When we're talking about research priorities and opportunities, this is very openly communicated to make people aware, to mobilize, to get all this expertise. But as soon as we say now we're talking about the call text, we are closing the doors. And that also involves partners from the consortium. They are not around the table anymore. This is then a closed discussion. And if you want to have experts, even in this closed setup, then it gets complicated, because then really this conflict of interest needs to be very clear. The firewalls need to be in place so that still the organization can engage, although these experts can, of course, not. But again, there are different phases in this process where you can be more open, where you can involve these experts also in terms of perhaps writing bits and pieces. But as soon as decisions are taken, this goes in the call text. It's shaped in this and that way. These are the priorities that we want to then really address. Then you somehow need to close the doors more strictly. All right. So what we have as a backbone of our entire operation is our roadmap. You might call that strategic research innovation agenda, or in our case, it's our roadmap that lays out the thematics, and it's very openly developed, right? We do a lot of consultation. We're talking to many people, involving them so that they are part of the game, that they know where we're heading, that they can engage in the priority and agenda setting. And that means, as the openness is an issue that's always asked for, you need to be clear what openness means for you and whom you're addressing, right? There are different layers of openness that we want to ensure. So one is the openness to new funding partners. We are reaching out to new countries. We're reaching out to new funding partners in our countries or in new countries. We have grown. 2 countries have joined since we started, European ones. We have a couple of international partners beyond Europe. They're not associated countries to the European Framework Program that are joining the calls, but not partners in the consortium agreement. So you want to be open, you want to communicate and invite new actors to bring in money and to join the calls and the activities. Then the openness to new stakeholders. That's where you want to mobilize. We need to publish that, of course, widely, communicate it widely, but there is, of course, the opportunity to really mobilize different kinds of communities, to reach out to them with our Agora, with the city panel, with other kinds of formats, so that you really create a community that is aware, that engages, and this is usually quite well received, and we see that we get a lot of support, that we encourage these communities to engage, and we take their input quite seriously. And then, of course, there is the openness towards new target groups. There might be specific target groups that are not your natural community, right? So I mentioned the example of the NGOs. That's a few of them come from the research perspective, and they might take it easier to engage, but for many of them, this is really difficult. So you might need to look into how can you mobilize them, how can you bring them into your partnership, how can you integrate them into your community, and what kind of support do they need, right? That they are even able to talk to researchers, to engage in a research projects. That's, if you're going to go beyond your usual suspects, you might want to consider also creating some interfaces to openness towards new target groups. So with that, summing it up, what my take is on the governance of European partnerships. You need dedicated substructures to accommodate different needs and setups in your governing board, in your kind of organization that you're establishing, and that you're able to really cover your different range of activities that you have decided. You need substantial resources to manage that. On the administration, this is a marathon, right? This is not something that's not easily done. You can't do that as a part-time job. Besides a lot of other things, this needs dedication, resources to cover it. And the co-funding, that's the setup that we have, right? The co-funding helps us. We could not do that in this framework without having the co-fund that helps us finance all these activities. I have run the network before we had the partnership, and this was a smaller backbone. This was a much smaller operations. So you can add a lot with a co-funder if you want to use that. You need a consortium, or it helps, I guess, to have a consortium that includes serious capacities to implement and the link to policy making, so that you can connect well to your national context, to the European context, that you can bring these results into your national communities and the ecosystem, so that there is a wider impact. So it's a combination of very different kinds of organization that makes it really interesting and inspirational. The national resources for participation, so it's not only you as coordinators or as part of the management teams. Every partner needs the national resources to take a benefit out of that. And those that are investing more, that strategically engage in the partnership, they get much more out of it than just pulling in the money and just participating in a call and letting it go. Right? So this is a strategic investment that you might want to think about. And And basically, the partnerships are a shift in perception. It's not a funding network. This is an ecosystem that you're creating, and it can be quite powerful if you make it to one. Really explore the different ways that you have beyond the funding in some strategic activities to connect to the policy making, to connect to some strategic activities also on the global level, and really shape something that is a thematic ecosystem in the areas that you're addressing, building upon the funding, but taking it a step further to create a wider impact. And I would leave it to that.
Thank you, Margit. Now it's 1:45, and it's time for lunch. So I think for you, Margit, I guess there are a lot of questions related to how you do it in DUT, because I think you have so much good practice that could be interesting for other partnerships to learn from and gain experience from. So if we save the questions for you to the Q&A session, you will be around for that one. So now it is time for lunch. Well, I am not sure exactly where it is, but follow those that know. We will meet back again at 1:30 precise and continue. And yeah, that's all from me. But we start precisely 1:30.
Yeah.
So please take your seats. We start again. And this part consists of 2 presentations, and then we will be followed by a Q&A before we start with this learning together interactive session. A couple of things. The presentations, as was said earlier, they will be distributed via the Learn site later on as soon as possible, I understand. The Learn team will try to make a summary of the Q&As, and especially since we had a lot of challenges with the microphones in the previous session, so that people can understand what was asked, etc. And since we've had so many challenges with the microphones, if you have questions for this part, please try to type it in the chat if possible, or use this one at the podium if you have questions to post, because otherwise the recordings will not have sound and they will be more or less useless. Okay, so if that's fine with you, we start now. We continue with the DUT parts. And now it's Teresa Losek from FFG that will talk about the experiences and good practice organizing the joint call. So if you are ready, Teresa, you are with us online, so please go ahead.
Thank you. I think someone, I'll just say when to switch forward the slides, right?
Yes,
Like
I will
before.
change the slides for you.
Perfect. All right, there we go. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. My name is Teresa, as said, and I lead the call implementation team of DUT. Next slide, please. So today we will be looking at the DUT calls, but more importantly, what can go wrong in the calls and how we in DUT have tried to fix it. Because the calls themselves, as Margit said earlier, are really quite standardized. And if I just go through each call, like how we do it on paper, then there won't be anything really new, and it won't be anything you can't find in a dozen different places. So instead of doing that, we'll be focusing on the problems that we've encountered and, like I said, how we will fix them. So next slide, please. First, though, to do that, I will give you just some quick overview. So most of this you will have heard before today from Margit. Nevertheless, it's quite important to understand what I'm going to be going into, so we will go over some important facts. DUT is a co-funded partnership We have 3 completed calls so far. The first one launched in 2022, and the most recent completed one ended this year in July. The DUT consortium, as Margit said, consists of both co-fundable agencies, that's EU member states and Horizon Europe associated countries, as well as agencies from beyond this scope. And DUT calls have 2 stages. So we have a stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is the pre-proposal stage, which means that a first project draft is submitted by the applicants and evaluated. And this first project draft is, as it says, a draft. So it's much shorter and much less detailed than the full proposal, which obviously has the advantage that we have that those drafts, those ideas that are maybe very clearly not fundable, we don't force them to write a whole full proposal when that's a lot of work and work for nothing, basically. Instead, we have then a stage 2, but the important part about the pre-proposal stage, and this is important because it goes into the problems that we will talk later on about, is that after the pre-proposal stage, the co-fundable agencies are allowed to be, or actually all agencies, not just co-fundable agencies, all agencies are allowed to be oversubscribed up until a certain limit. The co-fundable agencies are allowed to be oversubscribed ×4, and the non-co-fundable ×3. We'll get into that later, but the important part is oversubscription. For those of you that are very new, is basically the factor by which an agency's budget is exceeded. So if you have a funding demand of 2 million and your budget is only 1 million, then your oversubscription is 2, basically, because you have a funding demand that's twice as high as your budget. So that's the stage 1. First project draft is submitted. We'll invite those that are very good to stage 2. And stage 2 is called the full proposal stage, which means that the full proposal, which is much more detailed, has detailed costs, detailed work packages, a detailed time frame, is submitted and evaluated again. And then after evaluation, we actually select the proposals that we want to turn into projects. So we select the proposals we suggest for funding. And after that stage, the actual contracting starts. So that's the way that the calls go in very rough terms. Stage 1, stage 2, and important to remember what oversubscription means, because that will come up a couple of times. Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. So we have here on this slide the 4 main problems that we encountered during the 3 calls that we have completed. So we have unbalanced over and under subscription rates, which basically means we have some agencies that are very highly oversubscribed, which then leads to them blocking what we call blocking the ranking list, which basically means that some projects which have those very highly oversubscribed agencies in them cannot be selected because those agencies don't have the money. And on the other hand, however, we will have agencies in those proposals that would have that money that would be needed for these proposals and more, which means that they are undersubscribed. So they have a budget that is higher than the funding demand. So this is quite we have had quite an imbalance there, where we had some agencies that were incredibly highly oversubscribed, 12, 13 oversubscription, whereas we had other agencies that didn't have any proposals at all. And more often than not, there was a connection there, because the proposals that would have been able to be funded by those agencies that were undersubscribed were blocked by the highly oversubscribed agencies. So there is a connection there. And this is problematic because agencies that are unable to spend their budgets might have ramifications from that for subsequent calls, like their budgets getting cut and so on. The next problem is that we have to eliminate excellent proposals due to financial constraints. This is also connected to the oversubscription. Basically, we will have proposals that have very high scores. And unfortunately, because those proposals have very highly oversubscribed agencies in them, we can't select them for funding because those agencies don't have the money to fund them, which obviously leads to proposals with very good scores being lost. This can be frustrating for applicants, which means those applicants might not resubmit. And obviously also for the partnership as a whole, the impact creation suffers, which is because obviously we want to fund those proposals because we want the impact that they can create. And if we can't fund them due to financial reasons, then we lose that impact as well. The next problem is losing potential top-ups. So we've heard top-up being mentioned quite a few times today in the morning. Obviously, if we lose potential top-up, this happens because we would have undersubscribed agencies that have the theoretical budget to spend, but they can't spend it, which also means they can't generate the co-fund from that budget, basically. And losing top-up is problematic for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we use it for management costs. We already heard what it can be used for. Projects get co-funded as well, and also not unimportant is the additional activities that are funded with co-fund, like in DUT, it's the Urban Doers Grant. There are several additional activities throughout the partnerships, and we will hear more about that, I think, in the next presentation. But the important part to remember is if we have budget that we can't spend, and we also lose the top up that budget could have generated. And the last problem is insufficient agency budgets from the very start, which is basically the root cause of all of these other problems. It means that agencies have a very active community, but for whatever reason, they don't have the sufficient money to fund the proposals that they get. Yeah, so this is the four most important and most common as well hurdles that we faced. Next slide, please. And we have here a summary. So the summary from those hurdles is basically all of the problems, or most of them, can be traced back to insufficient budget. And this threatens the goal on several levels. We lose good projects and therefore also the impact. We have agencies that can't spend their money, and we can therefore lose out on top-up. That's the summary, basically. Projects are lost, impact is lost, and top-up is lost, and therefore also additional activities which could also create impact are also threatened. Next slide, please. So we have now, I will go with you through the stepping stones that we developed. What's important here to consider before going in is that problems occur in every phase of the call implementation, so all of the stages that I mentioned earlier. And depending on the issue, the ideal point in time to address this issue is different. So budget insufficiencies, where basically the agency budget is concerned, are obviously best addressed in the planning phase before the call launches. It's always more difficult later on. Then stage one, the most important thing there is to figure out how to save as many excellent pre-proposals as possible, because once a pre-proposal is eliminated, obviously it's not coming back. So that's the important thing in stage one. Stage two is generally too late to address anything fundamental, because the pre-proposal pool or the invited pre-proposals determine the full proposal pool. So that's finalized at the end of stage one. But you can still have changes on the project level. So projects could add partners, they could replace partners, and so on. So this is mostly stage two. You can there mostly focus on the individual proposals, not so much anymore on anything fundamental. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to go over the implementation stepping stones that we've developed. One of them has been around since call 1. The others were introduced in call 3, which is why now is quite an interesting part, or an interesting point in time to look at the outcomes, because we have now finally a call finalized where we had all of these stepping stones implemented. So it's quite a, if we wanted to go in depth, it would be quite complicated, especially for newcomers, which is why I will instead give a general overview for each mechanism, and then also give you the results and the outcome by looking at call 3 in comparison to the previous calls to see what happened because of these mechanisms. I have also slides with more information, with more details for those of you that are not newcomers, that are maybe already experts, or at least more advanced, or have been here with us for more time. In case you might be looking at also implementing a similar solution for your partnership. So there are slides with a closer look included, but I will skip those in order not to confuse people and also not to take up too much time. So they're mostly so you can look at them later on when you get the slides. If there are any questions or anything, then you can also always reach out to me if you questions that arise later on. Obviously, I will also be here during the Q&A. So next slide, please. Right, here we have the first stepping stone. This is one of the ones that was implemented for the first time during the last call. And the place in the implementation timeline is at the end of stage 1, because this stepping stone targets the oversubscription limits. So as I said, at the end of stage 1, agencies are allowed to be oversubscribed a certain amount of times. Oversubscription limits have certain advantages. Obviously, you could say, why bother? Why not care about oversubscription at all and just take as many proposals as possible and then look at it in stage 2? The reason we don't do this is that first of all, one of the advantages is that if you have applicants with very low chances at being funded, we have a score that's basically measured in points. 15 points is the maximum. Anything below 12 is quite unlikely to be actually funded at the end. So if we invite something that is very, very low rated and make them go through the process of designing a full proposal, it's quite unfair to the applicants, because they go through a lot of work and we know that the chances of funding them are quite low. So this is one of the advantages. The other advantage is that applicants get a chance to improve their proposals due to this two-stage process, because at the end of stage 1, they receive expert feedback. So even if they're denied, they receive expert feedback, which hopefully gives them a chance to improve, be it because they get invited to write the full proposal or because they get rejected and they want to maybe resubmit. So both is possible, and they get expert feedback at the end of stage 1. Then we have also the advantage that these oversubscription limits give us planning security, because it means we avoid having a far too high budget demand at the end of stage 1. So at the end of stage 2, due to these oversubscription limits, we already know at the end of stage 1, due to these oversubscription limits, we already kind of know where we're headed. We can sort of determine this is the budgets that will be needed and so on. And also the agencies can see, okay, we are very highly oversubscribed. Maybe it might be good to reach out to our ministry to see if we can mobilize more budget or something. So it gives us planning security as well. However, that said, if the limits are too strict, they can artificially decrease the pool of full proposals. So basically, we eliminate viable pre-proposals purely due to financial reasons, because we have far too strict limits. This is sort of the downside of such limits. This is why it's very important to find a balance to avoid making them too strict, but also avoid making them too high so that they're not effective anymore. For DUT, we had limits in calls 1 and 2 that were stricter than similar calls, and also we found that they were too strict, so we increased them. And this was basically the first balancing mechanism that we took. We increased the oversubscription limits. The next slide is the closer look. So we can skip that. As I said, I won't go into those details. So next slide, please. Thank you. Right, the next stepping stone is the only one we've had since call 1. So this is called the inclusion procedure. It used to be called the widening procedure. It's now called inclusion procedure, and the place in the implementation timeline is during stage 2. Because the inclusion procedure basically targets those agencies that still have unspent budget at the end of stage 1. What we do is that we have a way for proposals to basically add more partners to their consortium. Those partners have to be from agencies that have still budget left to spend. So we publish a list of those agencies on our website and tell the applicants, if you want to add more partners to your proposal, then go to those agencies or go look for partners in those countries, in those regions, and hopefully also improve your proposal. Because, and this is the other side of the coin, so to speak, we also have some invited proposals that have received expert feedback. Like I said, they always get it at this stage, at the end of stage 1, stating that they should involve more partners. Maybe they don't have enough stakeholders on board or not enough municipalities or whatever. So on one hand, the agencies that have unspent budget left benefit because they get more applicants, and on the other hand, the proposals that received feedback that they need more partners benefit because they get that those partners. So that's the way the inclusion procedure works. Right, next slide is again the closer look, and we can skip that again and go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay. The third stepping stone is the fallback procedure, which is placed at the end of stage 1 for the agencies, but during stage 1 for the proposals. So basically what we do here is, first of all, we look at all of the proposals at the end of stage 1 that we can invite, and we invite them. And then only once everyone has been invited, that we can invite, keeping in mind the oversubscription limits, then we look at the proposals that are left, and we look to see if there are some proposals that might face elimination due to partners from only one highly oversubscribed agencies in their consortium. So if they have obviously multiple agencies in their consortium, and if only one of them is oversubscribed, then they are eligible for the fallback procedure. They will be asked to remove the partners from said agencies from the consortium and maybe replace them with others from undersubscribed agencies as part of the inclusion procedure. So this is quite obviously this is quite a lot of work for the applicants, and we basically forced them to change their consortium. I mean, we don't force them. They can always say that this is not an option for them, and then they're just eliminated as they would have been anyway. But it is obviously a lot of work for them. It's quite complicated, and this is therefore only a last resort, and it only targets proposals that would not have been invited otherwise. And there are some more eligibility criteria that have to be observed, like the partners that would be eliminated have to be a rather small part regarding their person months and so on. But still, it's a very small, very last resort, and only a small portion actually is eligible for this procedure. Last year was only one proposal due to the strict eligibility criteria. And the most important thing to keep in mind here is we only include proposals in this list that we would have eliminated anyway. So this is important here. Right, then the next slide we can skip again and go to the last, yeah, there we go, thank you. The last stepping stone is the mandatory budget tool, which is also a stepping stone that we had for the first time in the last call. And here the place in the implementation timeline is the planning phase. So this happens before the call opens for application. DUT, the call always opens in September, so on September 1st. We opened this year for the current call, and this happens before that. So this happens when the agencies are planning the call. This targets the insufficient budgets because, as I said, they are the main problem that occurs in DUT calls, but they are quite difficult to fix once the call has actually opened. Because not all agencies have reserve funds. So some agencies, when we tell them you are oversubscribed by this and that amount, they say, okay, we have budget we can still put into the call and therefore decrease our oversubscription. This is not possible for all agencies, obviously. So if those agencies start into the call with insufficient budgets, then that's very hard to fix. So in order to avoid this, We have a budget tool that we base on data from previous calls, and that tool basically estimates how much budget a participating agency will need this year. It also tests out how certain parameters affect this budget need, like their funding limits or the budget, or even their number of covered pathways and topics, so on. So those parameters can also be included in the budget tool. And all of this basically gives them an estimate of how much budget they will need. And if those needs are not met, then they are not able to participate in the current call. Next slide, please. Yeah, this we can skip again. So next slide, please. This is just a quick overview of what this looks like. So as you can see, the blue fields, the dark blue fields, are those that can be changed by the agencies, and down there at the bottom where it's green and red, you see those agencies that are basically green, they are allowed to participate in a call, and those that are red, they do not meet the budget needs and they do have to make adjustments. So we work with them, we tell them you meet the needs or you don't meet the needs, and if they don't meet the needs, we try to find a solution. This year it worked in every case, so we didn't have to exclude any agencies because of this, because there was always a solution that we found. But yeah, that's the budget tool. Okay, next slide, please. Here you can see a quick overview of the problems. That's the things written on the outside in the squares. And the solutions, that's the things written in the white text. As you can see, most of the 3 stepping stones that I mentioned mostly target the unbalanced oversubscription and undersubscription rates, and also the elimination of excellent proposals. The budget tool targets all of them at the root, which is why the budget tool was quite an important tool to implement. It was also quite difficult to implement, I have to say. It was controversial among the agencies. Obviously, we had to have a pilot version for this, but we got it to work. And it, as you will see now, it did affect the call in a very positive way. So next slide, please. So what's important to keep in mind here is that the DUT call, just for some context before I go over the results, had much more proposals than the previous calls. So we received 39% more proposals, and therefore also 38% more funding demand than we did in the previous calls. I guess the topics were just more targeted to the communities. We just had a better or more proposals this year, but the budget itself decreased. So obviously not an ideal combination, more proposals and more funding demand versus a lower budget. So a rather difficult situation to be in. But next slide, please. We were able to make it work. So as you can see here, we had better results in stage 1 than we did in the previous calls. You can ignore the numbers. They're not that important for anyone outside of DUT. They're just there so you can basically calculate it for yourself. But the important thing is we had, for the first time since the launch of DUT, basically, we had an invitation rate of in stage 1 that was above 50%. So we were able to invite more than half of the submitted eligible proposals this year. But in the previous years, it was always much lower than that. And also important and a good news was that this year we were able to reject more proposals due to low scores than due to financial reasons. So of the proposals that were rejected, more were actually rejected due to quality than they were rejected due to financial scores. So all around, quite good results for stage 1. Stage 2, next slide, please. Also had a rather good outcome, so to speak. Basically, we had 47 projects funded this year, which is almost as many as in call 1, where we had 48, and more than in call 2, where we had 42, despite a much lower budget. So the first graph you can see here, the budget and the way it developed. Basically, we went from 72 million to 58 to 45 in across the calls, so the budget steadily decreased, but then the number of projects did not. So we were able to actually beat last year's call, despite the fact that we had a higher budget last year, and we were able to almost reach the number of the first year's call, even though we had a far lower budget. So quite a good news there, and this obviously led to a far better balance or efficiency in budget spending, where we were able to spend 88% of the budget available in this year's call, where in the previous years we had 58 percentage in call 1 and 64 in call 2, so around 60% in the first two calls that we spent of our budget, versus 88% in actual like this year. So as you can see, we spent our budget much more efficiently. We were able to keep our numbers constant regarding the projects, and this is means obviously that the result was quite good. So next slide, please. I think the next slide is a summary. Yeah, so the first stage, as I said, we invited more than 50% of the proposals and rejected more proposals due to low scores. And stage 2, we were able to spend 88% of our available budget, and we're able to keep our proposal numbers mostly constant, despite the decrease in budget. Next slide, please. So to sum up, we were able to, as you can see, solve the problems that were listed, the most common problems, or at least target them with these mechanisms. And obviously there is still room for improvement, but it is a very promising first result, and we will continue to adapt it as it comes. We already adapted, for example, the fallback procedure to work better. So we are obviously still working on it. It's never going to be perfect, but it is, I would say, quite a good step ahead that we had. I think the next slide already sums up basically all of the stepping stones again in the table just for your information. But that would be all I have for you today. And yeah, like I said, if there are questions, I will be here during the Q&A as well. And if there are questions afterwards, always feel free to email me if you want to. Thank you.
This was really interesting presentations, but I think since you are all staying here till the Q&A session, we try to postpone the direct questions to that part. But stay online. I guess there are a lot of interest to compare what is used in your DUT compared to others, how you're willing to share the information, etc., etc. Next up is Margherita Cappelletto, if I pronounce it right, from the Sustainable Blue Economy Partnerships, and she will talk about what is the work of the co-funded partnerships, call management, additional activities, how to focus, etc. Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, I belong to the National Research Council of Italy, seconded at the Ministry for coordinating the Sustainable Blue Economy Partnership. Thanks to ERA Learn colleagues. It was very interesting that when I was contacted because the workshop has been organized, we were thinking internally after 4 years of running a partnership that it was really the time to prepare a toolkit for newcomers, because in such a long time framework of a partnership, you always have newcomers, and not only new partners from new organizations, but also renewed staff. So I think I will exploit a lot the outcomes of this workshop also to prepare our toolkit. So thank you again. Thanks also for having me tasked with this aspect of looking beyond the call. I cannot be more in agreement with Margit in saying that the partnership goes definitely beyond being a machinery for calls. If you take blue economy and all the prospect. I took here the OECD report Prospect 2050, but when we started, it was the data from the Blue Economy Observatory in Europe that really questioned the community. So what we can do together to ensure a smooth transition towards a sustainable blue economy by 2030. And here it comes, the mechanism, how the partnership works, every partnership, but in our case, the ambition was to really address this transition to a sustainable blue economy partnership. The consortium grew. We started with 25 countries and are now more than 32. And this is another proof of the fact that when you have ambitious objectives, you have to keep a community, first build it, and then keep the community tightened together. For this reason, we have set up a Brussels office from where we ensure the connectivity at regional level with the European sea basins and the Atlantic Ocean, at European level with the other partnership and the European institutions, and at global level. Thanks to our colleagues in the Brussels office, we keep liaising with the G7 because they have a working group on the future of the seas and oceans, for example, as well as with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UN, of the UNESCO. But I'm using this slide to say that you need a community, you need to envisage activities to animate this community in order to make your strategy. Our strategic agenda is the results of a consultation process that brought together all these voices across countries, across sector, across disciplines, including social science and humanities that are embedded through an international organization, the European Alliance for Social Science and Humanities. We came to our focus topics where we are investing, and here is the second reason why you need to do more than join calls. When you have a strategic agenda, which is actually a wish list of priorities and priority objectives, I believe that joint calls are not the only tool for implementing them. You can implement your strategy through other activities. There are a portfolio, and also it is a very interesting creative process. I will show you in a minute why. So first of all, just a recap. We have just launched our third call for proposal, but we already have available the results of the first two calls with nice brochures that illustrate the projects. We managed to co-fund 19 projects in the first call and then 24 in the second call. Let's hope to get these trends again in the following up. We will have 3 additional joint calls before we close, but you are reading here that the opportunities does not stop there. The opportunities are technically related to the fact that we are implementing additional activities. And when colleagues from ERA-Learn used in the title of my presentation, shifting from joint call to additional activities, I believe, I might be wrong, that they wanted also to emphasize that it's a request for the Commission. Actually, I'm not sure that the third wave of partnership, I think you will be a little bit luckier than us. You will not have to submit another proposal as we had. But in our case, in order to release the subsequent installments by the European Commission, we had, it was explicit in the call test to envisage additional activities. So the entry input perhaps was this one, and it is precisely for this reason that in the partnership we basically identify additional activity in a very specific way. We do not consider communication, community building as an additional activity. For us, this is part of the coordination and management, and I will explain what is an additional activity for us, but please this is not written in stone. This is also the beauty of flexibility, and it's up to the consortium to agree. Also in terms of budget allocation and refunding rate. But in recalling what Teresa has just excellently presented, how the mechanism work, I think that the fact that in the joint call you have some needed structure to implement the activities can be borrowed also to handle other activities that are not joint call. And to give an example, of an action that we do not consider an additional activity, but it's I mean, embedded in the life of a partnership is when you co-fund projects. Is not that you leave them alone. You have them hand in hand, hopefully until they reach, or you facilitate them reaching the market. For instance, we have this work package entirely dedicated to support ensuring impact of projects, for instance, through train them, through developing policy brief in order to make this science to policy connectivity. But again, in our jargon, they are not technically additional activities. And here they are. Our additional activities are those for which we are investing, as the Commissioner colleague mentioned, a non-financial contribution. We erroneously use the in-kind word, but let's speak in terms of non-financial contribution. One by one, not for the red one, because it's in the making, and then I will not, I don't want to bother you too much. I will give you this example by summarizing the what, the why, and the how. So let's start from the development of an agile tool for aligning national research and innovation projects. It was a proposal that stemmed from the idea that you have a lot of national potential with the national funded project, and it's worth making them in contacts in order, I mean, to produce critical mass, of course, added value of international connectivity, as well as directionality. Basically, there is a call inside the consortium to see whether a funding organization would like to join this alignment of national programming. A governing board, a small governing board of the additional activity is set up to agree on which topic then the funding organization will look internally. Of course, it should be a topic aligned with the partnership strategy. And then this selection procedure that is autonomously performed at the national level is done, so that this project coordinator can then make some clustering activity together, like developing position paper, developing additional proposals, or science policy brief. The outputs can be very different. How it works practically is that the participation to the meetings is supported by the partnership, but not their additional effort, because they are bringing this as the so-called non-financial contribution. And you will see there that in order to value this non-financial contribution, the refunding rate for these activities is very low and is set equally to the 30% that of the cost that they generate, because they are generating direct cost. Please, it cannot be possible to consider eligible the cost of the project. This is not accepted by the Commission. It's only the additional effort that these national projects are bringing to this activity of the partnership. But then the added value is that you enter the partnership mechanism with all the benefits. You can join a community that is much, much broader. When we organize public conference, when we organize meetings of partnership projects. Of course, they are considered part of the partnership family. Second additional activity, we have, of course, identified as an issue in Europe, actually a very long standing issue. There are key monitoring strategies in Europe. The ones that concerned us mostly are the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, in some way also the Water Strategy Framework Directive, as well as the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive. So what? There is still the need to standardize data collection procedures, data sharing procedures, modeling, and sometimes rationalize and avoid the double funding when the instruments are deployed to collect data. So we said, if partner organization, and in this case, of course, you need to have some environmental agency or agencies that deals with the monitoring, joins together to reflect also from, let's say, a regulation framework perspective, how to better rationalize the monitoring and make case studies. This could be an activity with the EU added value that implement the partnership strategy. I didn't spend time at the beginning, but of course our strategy is supposed to contribute to the European policy objectives and strategies. Among those, again, the Marine Strategy Framework Directives and the others. So this additional activity looks like more as an internal project that, again, those agencies willing to implement this can develop. In our situation now, there is a pilot case put forward by our Danish colleagues and others that are joining on the same topic. The same figures there. The cost for running this activity are refunded only at a 30% rate because this is considered a non-financial contribution to the partnership. So the rate is really the minimum. And again, from one side, it looks like not appealing, but for the other is as if you are bringing financial contribution through assets that are not financial. That's the point. This is, let's say, inside my heart, because we pushed a lot for these activities, and I don't think there are many partnerships doing this. It was a huge effort that until now has not the reward that we were thinking, but basically we managed to have a few, but quite enough research performing organization in our network that agree to put at the disposal of the community a portfolio of infrastructure. So we are now basically acting also as a runner, as a handling a transnational access scheme. Many of you might be acquainted with the infrastructure access scheme under the European framework programs call, but again, we are definitely less appealing. And why we are less appealing? Because since this is a non-financial contribution, the costs are refunded only at 30%. And you can imagine that for an infrastructure provider with heavy cost of running, maintaining an infrastructure, this is questionable. However, they recognize the added value of joining a partnership that can have an impact definitely beyond. We know that providers would like their infrastructure to be used as much as possible throughout the year, but in order to ensure openness and transparency, their job ends somehow in the provision of the infrastructure. Then there is a work package with a sort of call secretariat that prepare, launch, runs the call, ensure the evaluation of the project that apply to the transnational access scheme, and then finally put in contact the awarded project with the research infrastructure provider. The beauty of this opportunity is that, first of all, the call is open worldwide. The cons is that we are not able to support the projects, but only to grant, to offer access for free, because we cannot have on board all potential, we cannot know who will be a potential winner of this call. So basically, whoever would like to access an infrastructure that the partnership put at the disposal for free has to bring his own, has to self-fund his own or her own activities. Very important to understand, and here I would like to complement an information that was said this morning. It is true that 99% of cases the cost categories are eligible according to the national ways of managing them, but for the research infrastructure, unfortunately, the partnership legal framework was not conceived to have such an additional activity. So unit costs that are the way Europe is used to pay and report costs for infrastructure are not allowed. So the provider did this additional effort of splitting the unit cost according to the number of days, number of access they want to give their infrastructure for the partnership into the regular eligibility categories that you know are personal cost, purchase cost, and of course you can have the equipment cost. It's just a pity because after years of having finally found this unit cost mechanism to report and pay the infrastructure cost, it's a sort of coming back. So whenever there will be another partnership in the next framework program, we will definitely advocate to align better at the European Commission level the different schemes, because considering the cost of infrastructure, just to consider a research vessel, these are really national assets. When countries decided to fund the partnership, they thought, of course, I will bring to the partnership not only in cash investment, but also my infrastructure. I mean, here in Italy, we have 4 different marine institutes. Each of them has a research vessel. So that is funded yearly by the Ministry of University and Research. So it's an asset that cannot be disregarded when bringing contribution to such a huge partnership. I will end now a little bit by, how do you say, contradicting myself, because this is technically an activity that we consider part of our follow-up of projects. So it doesn't follow the 30% refunding rate and in cash contribution, but I would like to address this because it's really part of what I was mentioning when saying you shouldn't then forget your projects. First of all, because the feedback we received so far by some project coordinators were so enthusiastic of the fact to being kept in the loop and the possibility of leverage additional opportunities through such an action run by the partnership, that is worth presenting this. The idea is not very different from the alignment of national programming I presented as first additional activities, because basically the rationale is to create a network of projects that then can run activities together. But where is here the difference and added value? You take the projects funded by the partnership and the projects funded by other programs, other partnership with complementarities. The mission, we have a mission on ocean and water, clean ocean and water. So the mission has funded plenty of projects that can make synergy with the project that we found. So basically the consortium chose 2 thematics. and has launched a call for expression of interest open to projects that comes from different programs. The call now is open, so we are running the info webinar, and I don't know what will happen, but the response to the webinar was quite satisfactory. The idea is to support the coordinators of this project in joining together again to work on activities and outputs that they can set autonomously under the guidance of a board and the support of a secretariat, and then exactly produce an outcomes that will also ensure some legacy of the partnership. The expenses to support the organization of this meeting are covered, and the participation of at least the partnership project, we cannot support projects outside the partnership, to these activities is somehow facilitated because you know that projects funded by the joint call has to allocate budget mandatory to participate to the kickoff, midterm, and final meetings. So we are organizing the meeting of the portfolio back to back. So their participation is ensured also because we try to make profit of this back to back mechanism. You see there that I have brought thematic/regional. This is very specific to our partnership. Our partnership builds on the sea basin priorities. So we want then to go back to our local communities in the sea basin also by making these critical mass clustering projects around the sea basin on a topic that the sea basin stakeholder will decide themselves. So this was my last slide. Of course, I am here for any question because I couldn't dig too much into the operational details and reimbursement and I mean all the questions that we received by our partners when building these activities. But yes, I'll stay on the whole afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you.